Hey everybody, welcome back to Addiction and the Three Principles. Today, we're going to do things a little bit differently than what we normally do with the group discussions. We're going to talk about this opioid epidemic and what everybody thinks the real cause is. That's what we'd like to discuss today. And Harry and I decided we wanted to start with all the participants and see what people think about it, where people are at, and then kind of take it from there. So we'd love to hear from anybody. I have people muted, just keep down a background noise, but you can either unmute yourself or click on the raise hand feature in the participants tab. And we'd love to just hear what people have to say about it.
Maybe we could go around, Greg, to each person and just ask them what they see. And that way, everybody will participate, and also we'll get an idea of what they see on their head and so on. Maybe Scott, you could start. Just how you see this opiate. It's how do you spell it, Greg? O-P-O. It's an I-D at the end, right?
A-T-E, opiate.
Opiate, yeah.
Or opioids.
Yeah, just for your information, I didn't know what an opiate and an opiate was. An opiate with an A-T at the end is something that comes from the poppy, and it's a natural, and that the opium and morphine are examples of that. And then you have a synthetic opiate, which is heroin, and then you have not a semi-synthetic, which is opium, and then you have an opiate, which is purely synthetic, and that's like fentanyl and so on. I had to look that up to see what all they, and they're all classified under as a narcotic. And the other thing that I saw with that was someone said to me, more people are dying from pharmaceuticals than they are from street drugs. So just giving you that information, so on. So Scott, how do you see just whatever comes to your head? You have to unmute yourself, Scott. Or
yeah, I guess I've looked at it from a couple of different ways, and so I can only just tell you what I'm thinking now, I guess. If I look at it historically, at one time, like my growing up, our doctors, at least in my experience, were not so quickly in giving you pain medication. And then it seemed like from one extreme to the other, where they gave you pain medication for every little thing, and then evidently it was, people could get it easily. And I'm only it's just a little experience, that I see with it. I guess it's become easier to get, more acceptable, but the addictive part of it, as extreme as it's gotten, I don't know what to say in a sense, to tell you the truth. One thing that sort of sobered me up, I was over at a friend, not a close friend, but someone I had met, him and his wife, and his wife's granddaughter had OD'd on opiates. And I mean, I was just shocked. She had been graduated from high school at 16 years old, and I guess had gotten hooked on the opiates. Now, I don't know if they were legal or illegal or how she got them or whatever. But I mean, it just shocked me. I mean, I just cried when I heard that, So I don't know. I guess if you're asking me the availability of prescribed medications too easily being prescribed, so it's easy for someone to say to get these drugs and then get addicted to them. I really don't know, entirely.
Okay, that's good, Scott. That's a good start. Maybe
yeah, thanks, Scott. We got Timothy with his hand up.
Oh, perfect.
It's not letting me unmute people today.
Hi. From my experience with, was in intervention in lieu of conviction and all that, like drug court, and then Turning Point, which is another like form that's more severe or whatever. But just the whole being there for so long, like I feel like the judge sees right through people kind of doing the right thing. There's a feeling that the judge has. Some people are doing the right thing and some people are lying through their teeth. So to relate that to just the whole opiate epidemic, there's like gabapentin was prescribed like as a not a narcotic, but now the schedule is changed to where like gabapentin and other things are like now narcotics because people are just taking so much of them, abusing them and whatever. So I kind of missed the first couple minutes of this discussion, but
there was Tim. We're just trying to get a feel for what people think, like what you're expressing. That's all we're doing right now. And so what you're saying, this drug you mentioned, is it addictive? This thing that they're using as a substitute, or I'm not familiar with it. So.
Well, it's called gabapentin, and there's other ones like Flexeril that are muscle relaxers that, I mean, people in addiction that don't deal with underlying issues that they'll take 10 gabapentins. You know, somebody took 10 gabapentins and got a feeling, you know, off of them. So it changed the like drug classification or whatever schedule to like a narcotic. So that's,
well, it's strange to me that they, like, it looks like part of the problem with opiate is that they see a drug should be replaced by another drug type of scenario, one that helps them get off that main drug that they're on.
yeah, I mean, they have what is the patch for like methadone and all that. Back in the day, people were prescribed methadone to help with opiates and they still abused the methadone. And then I forget the patch that they take, but I mean, people just abuse stuff. They don't, yeah, it's needed for pain for like cancer patients and stuff. Like I believe that's what opiates and stuff were originally for, like Vicodin and all that. Yeah.
But you brought up a really good point, Timothy, which was what we were hoping to actually talk about today was the true cause of this opiate epidemic. It is not the drugs themselves, because people are clearly finding alternatives when they can't get the one that they originally started using. They just switch from one to another, and you know, eventually a lot of people end up on heroin and you know all that stuff. But that's not the cause of the epidemic. The epidemic is a symptom, and the true cause up to this point is really not being addressed because it's just been deemed to be a disease and kind of like this hopeless thing, and it's just something everybody has to fight for the rest of their life kind of deal. But the fact of the matter is, nobody would continue taking them if they felt secure about themselves and happy with their lives and where they were at. There'd be no need to try to escape in the first place. And that's not to say, I mean, I know there's people who end up in the hospital and end up on these medications, you know, under doctor's care and stuff and become addicted that way. But most of those people, when they leave the hospital, they don't continue using them. You know, it's not a guaranteed thing. You can become physically addicted to these things and not continue using them. So the drug itself obviously is not the problem. I mean, yeah, overdosing is a problem, obviously. That's not, you know, that's not what I'm saying, but the actual cause is not the drugs themselves. So all of this manpower and money being used on trying to get these drugs off the streets and tighter controls over, prescriptions and whatnot, it hasn't made a dent in it.
Yeah.
It hasn't made a difference at all, because that's not the problem. People will find a way to escape if that's what they feel they need to do. And that's this whole series that we've been doing for almost 2 years now, is because of that. We're trying to help people see the actual cause and to find the solution to that. And the solution is ultimately to understand where our experience of life comes from, and that it's not from circumstances and, people hurting us and things like that. Those are, hard things to go through. But there's many people who go through all of that stuff and never touch a drug or a drink or anything. So some people just naturally have this feeling that there's something beyond what we appear to be experiencing. And it really is the answer to see that, there's nothing to escape, because there's nothing really ever wrong. There's just, we go through things in life that hurt sometimes, and they will pass.
And also places where we misunderstand what we're going through at that moment, and thus make it a big deal, and so on. Tanya, what do you see with this topic? I know you have something on your mind with it, because it's very relevant to your consciousness and so on. Another cat. No, it's a dog.
That's Remy. Sorry, I have a cold, so my throat, I'm going to sound like I have sandpaper in my throat. I work at the safe injection site, the overdose prevention site. So I am in the heart of sort of the harm reduction world, in terms of, I get to see our folks come in and use and shoot fentanyl, heroin, crystal meth, all sorts of stuff. And so, we've reversed 27 deaths in 7 months. So I get to see sort of the front lines, the symptoms. So basically, a lot of our folks that come in are homeless. They don't have housing. They've lost pretty much everything. So there's the addicted part, where they're addicted to fentanyl, heroin, whatever drug it is. They've lost everything. So now that they've lost everything, in order to sort of build a life back up, housing's important. And we have a 5-year waiting list to get into housing. We have all these social sort of barriers for people to even be able to get on their feet. So it's not just about, being addicted to the drug. It's the networks that are not there because of funding, lack of, a lot of other social sort of issues. So, I mean, I don't think we can ever answer the question why it's happening. There's so many different factors, but basically, yeah, I don't know. That's all I got. Yeah.
I think. Oh, go ahead.
Just before I forget, what I was trying to get to earlier is that just like education for parents and stuff, I feel like is very important. I don't know if there's too much of that out there. Just I don't know, warning signs and all that.
You bring up a big point, Timothy, is that there is a feeling of hopelessness when you're in that network. You're homeless, and all your whole support system is destroyed, and you don't understand how to deal with the urge, and there's all of those more tremendous amount of factors, and the feeling is that I working with the people is that I've, you know, a lot of them are, I'm here again. You know, I'm just repeating the same cycle. I don't like the cycle. I don't want to be in the cycle. I'll give anything I could have just to have an ordinary life, like a house, like a little place to stay, a comfortable place, quiet place, and so on. But I'm here again, and I'm repeating the same cycle, and the feeling of hopelessness that the world doesn't really, it pretends to have the answer, and but the reality of it is a lot of people are not being helped at all, and that's understandable, because the world is at an extremely low level of consciousness when it comes to this subject. And to be honest, on most subjects, you know, if you look at the world, it's not a very high level of understanding. And I feel like, Timothy, I don't know if I'm correct, but I feel like the world is pretending. It pretends a lot on this subject. Here's the answer, do this, and if you really want it, it will happen, type
Yeah.
of thing. And there's a tremendous amount of support on, I guess, what I would say the wrong direction. And so in that, if people hear something, get a good feeling, then the next class they takes them back into a bad feeling, and then they lose what they have, and so on. At the same time, I notice this. I always have to say this. They're so wise. They're so beautiful. They're so real. They're so genuine. They're so honest, and they're on a spiritual journey. And that spiritual journey this is the perfect place for them to be. Tough, though, very, very, very tough. Yeah.
Yeah, I think also, like, I'm not totally blaming it on society, you know, but I think there's just something off with society in general. Like, I had read a book called The Perfection Deception, and it talked about like certain types of like um, models, like female models or sports stars or whatever, that they put a lot of work into the stuff they do, but really, you know, only the game-winning shot or the 50 points in one game gets shown.
Yeah. It's the way of the world right now. It's little snapshots of this, and that should be enough. I think that's actually one of the problems with the opiate crisis, is that as I've gone into it, it's a deep subject. There's a lot of factors that are involved in it, and you can't take a superficial, simple black and white approach. In the end, we understand that you have to have a spiritual experience and understand about thought. I mean, if you don't have that, you're going to be in a repetitive cycle. But it is a very, very, very complicated issue, especially with the mess that the world is, and the way doctors are prescribing drugs. This came to my mind. I had to do a little operation, and the doctor sent me to someone who would analyze my whole body or whatever. And the first thing she says, "Well, what drugs are you on?" And I said, "None." And she said, "Gee, I haven't met anyone like that for a long, long time." And I said, "You must be crazy. Crazy? What do you mean? Isn't it normal not to be on drugs?" She said, "No, everybody's on drugs." And that sent a scary vibe down me. I said, "Ugh," type of thing. And I was counseling a lady, and she was on 23 drugs, and they were all reacting against each other. It was just mesmerizing. When she finally came off all the drugs, it was all because she had a spiritual insight, and she saw something that was so simple that she dropped all those drugs. But it's a Well, it's a interesting scenario for sure, and
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Harry. You were saying. Harry, when we started the conversation, we're looking for, cause and effect of what's going on. And that's why I got into on the outside, there isn't enough education as far as that goes on what medications are for. Because basically if you're in pain, hopefully they're to get you through the pain until you are feeling better. And you don't get this explanation when you go to the doctors. If we're being realistic, they give you a medication. I mean, in my experience, limited experience in talking to other people, because what you're trying to do is to get back to feeling fairly good. Nothing, I don't think, is said about the state of mind that you're in or the total effect on drugs, that they have on you, because they're just to get you back to feeling so-called normal. And that's why I was talking about where I don't see this, let's say, on the outside. And I'm at the age now where I'm going to doctors for this thing and that, and I don't get the explanation unless I'm asking them questions all the time. It's a total different scenario. But again, what Greg's talking about, that is just so important, because you can get off these drugs. And I've seen it when I worked in a hospital in the past, on people quitting when they saw the strength that they had inside, along with, what was going to happen or to be expected, with certain medications. But they just didn't, they got back their own health. So that's important.
they have to know that. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem with the disease model, is that it takes the power away from the individual.
Yeah, it does.
It puts it in the hands of this gigantic imaginary thing. It's something that, people made up to describe something, to try to make sense of something. That doesn't make it true or real. It just means that people made it up to describe something. That was the best effort that they had at the time, and it's all done innocently. It's not, it's not like these medical professionals are out there saying, well, some might be all for the money, but they're not all out there saying, oh, well, let's just see how we can take people's money and keep them coming back. I believe that most medical professionals are genuinely trying to help. There's just a lot of misinformation out there. And when you go through medical school and your training is all around this disease concept, that's what you know. Mm-hmm. And of course, if you look at somebody who, gets some clean time away from these drugs and then goes back to it, it's easy to point at and say, well, it's a disease. And it looks factual, it looks real. But there's no disease, it's just a misunderstanding, a simple, innocent misunderstanding of how we experience life. We were never taught this growing up, most of us anyway, we were never taught this growing up.
Mm-hmm. And each person's experience is different, than the other person. So you can't cookie cut them. Their experience might be a lot easier in doing it. But just knowing that you have that understanding, and that's what will guide you to whatever course that you take. And, it's just great. It's not the healthcare professional. They're only there to guide you, to be part of the process. But it's to get your inner wisdom is what is just really important. And then you'll find a way to do it. I hope it's okay, but I always give my personal experiences. I was pretty much addicted to cigarettes. And when I started to realize that it was just my thinking, I got off my back on, why I should quit and whatnot. And one day I put them down, I never picked them up. Now I can't duplicate that. That was my experience at the time, but it was amazing, because I used to say it's easy to quit smoking. I quit 100 times. Staying quitting was the problem, but it was that quick. I couldn't believe it. And then I also bring up, well, people will say, well, you really didn't have the habit. Well, I used to go through the ashtray for a cigarette butt to light up. I imagine I had some kind of a habit with it. And so even they don't even want to believe it when it does happen sometimes, that it is possible. But again, it all gets back to the individual and their thinking and understanding what their thinking is and what part it plays in their life.
And how serious they take it. That's one of the things I noticed, and I probably, Greg, maybe not in your class, but in the classes I taught in recovery centers, it was so heavy. It was so serious. These people were tired. They were working hard at they were using their willpower and behind it, as hard as they were working, you could feel they didn't really believe it. And the first thing I'd always say to them was, lighten up, relax. Let's have a little, a softer feeling. And that was incredibly hopeful for them, because as soon as they relaxed, of course, they started to feel, oh, I feel human again. And with the drugs, you lose your feeling of being a human being. In some ways, you enrich yourself as being a spiritual being, but you lose contact with your ordinary human being. And I know in 3 Principles, a lot of people have struggled with the ordinariness of what we're sharing, rather than, that it's true, spiritual sustenance will heal anything. But I am just an ordinary human being, and the more I accept that, the easier it is to be myself. And with a lot of people, they don't have a very good image of themselves, and they're not having any fun. I think that's the funniest thing about addiction, is that people are not having much fun except when they are on the drug or on the alcohol or whatever. And I guess, and of course, that's what they're associating the fun with. And in the end, that's why there's a crisis. People are associating their pleasure, their relief from the heavy feelings, the stressful feelings of life, through the drug or through the alcohol. And that's so important to understand. If we associate our pleasure through overeating or whatever it is that we're doing, or undereating or whatever, we're going to get out of balance. And that was one of the things that's all addiction is you're out of balance. And then as we, luckily through the 3 Principles, it gravitates us back to being in balance. And then, of course, we say, well, then it's easy to see what to do. And then we gravitate out of balance and being a human being and so on. I think people have overcomplicated this addiction thing on one level. It's one of the things, Greg, I've seen about you that it's really helped me to see how simple you see it. Like, I mean it, and I'm not trying to compliment you, but the simplicity of how you see that eliminates so many of the questions that we're trying to resolve when we're confused. And as a human being, we're often confused.
Well, it's often really helpful in many situations when you're trying to figure something out to wipe the slate clean. Because it's usually the ideas that you believe to be true that keep you from discovering the truth. We have almost 8 billion people on this earth. And that means that there's almost 8 billion different ways that this day is going to be experienced. But it all comes from the same source. It all comes from our thoughts, our ideas, our beliefs, the story of me. And we walk around and we look for ways to reaffirm the story of me. This is who I am. This is what I like. This is what I don't like. And how many people do you hear say, well, I can't change. That's just who I am.
Oh yeah,
That's
I used to tell myself that all the time, just to cut you off. Yeah, definitely. I'm with you. It's complicated and it's easy. I've had so much help from like 5 different avenues throughout my journey. And now I'm just starting to just
it looks like we lost Timothy.
He brings up a good point, though, something that when Tanya talked with Mark Howard, all the different routes that Timothy has experienced are helpful. They're paths along the way for his deeper understanding. They're all supportive, and I think when I look at my life, or I look at addicted life, my life wasn't, in that mode, except, of course, I had my behavioral patterns. Everything that came, that I studied, pieces that I took, they were supportive to me heading in the right direction. And so we are in the evolvement of uncovering the truth that is within ourselves. And we reach a stage of contentment or happiness, and we're still in that stage. It just gets a little bit easier because it's obvious the Spirit is directing us. But before that, before coming to that understanding, everything that's brought to us in terms of what we're working at, the steps, the different approaches, they're all bringing necessary ammunition for us to see clearer. It's spiritually perfectly designed. And so that's one of the things sometimes, another reason I see there's an opiate crisis, Greg, is each avenue is fighting against the other avenue. My way is better than your way. And what it seems to be is that if someone comes, wherever they end up is right for them at that particular point in time. And they're getting something, uncovering something, a program that we could say on a pure level is hurtful. It also has some kernel of truth within it. And that has been a very difficult thing for me to take a look at, is that we are all evolving with what life is bringing us. Are you on, Timothy?
Oh, I think so. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear knocking.
Oh, my friend's picking me up right now. I'm kind of trying to multitask and stuff.
Okay.
Here, you can, I'm sorry. You can mute me if you want.
Okay. How about you, Gavin? How do you see this?
I don't really, Harry. I know little about it. All the articles I've read have been about the actual company making the stuff. So I know very little on the ground.
Okay.
I don't really have an opinion, to be honest.
Okay. Nothing wrong with that. How about
Tanya? Tanya actually has something else to say. Go ahead. You're unmuted.
Sorry. So I just had a thought. I'm not sure who's familiar with Dr. Gabor Mate, but he was the physician downtown Eastside Vancouver in the heart of the opioid.
Yeah, he's very famous, actually.
So he talks about the development of the brain, from being in the womb to 6 years of age, and how much impact how you grew up, where you grew up, the stressors of what you had when you grew up.
Hold on. 4 people. 4 people. 2 people.
So he talks about that. So, and basically to sum it up, you know, the opposite of addiction to me is love, right? And so, you know, if you didn't grow up in a loving, caring environment where you were, you know, the self-worth piece was developed, the self-esteem, you know, that loving sort of nurturing stuff that I know as a mom today that I give to my son, you know, I see the difference between not having that and having that in terms of giving it to my son. So, so that piece is, you know, yes, the opioid epidemic crisis right now is talked about more because that drug specifically, and I think Scott spoke to, because it's easier, it's more accessible, it's cheaper. Fentanyl is like way cheaper than heroin. You know what I mean? There's reasons why there's this, you know, there's lots of different reasons for that. But I think the main piece is the lack of, you know, that brain development when you're a child. You know, so you have somebody, you know, they're going to be more susceptible to turning to drugs and alcohol or anything to kind of get what they need. It's an illusion, but we don't know that at the time. That we're seeking something to fill that void, if you will. You know, so that's a piece for me that helps me understand why I took the path I took, and how I see others. And basically, if you took a poll or stats, and Dr. Gabor Mate talks about most of the people that get addicted to the point of losing everything have had sexual abuse, trauma, abuse. And that's, you know, a big part of why, you know, one person gets addicted and one doesn't. You know what I mean? So.
And what you're saying too is that there's external reasons and there's internal reasons why these things happen. Okay,
Definitely.
we were addressing some of the external reasons, but the internal ones are the ones that are the game changer. You know, when you pick up on that, when you see the control that you really have, then the steps you take will be like Harry was talking about. Each step is in a direction that you should be going. Each is a lesson that you end up learning. And that's what I saw with people. And Harry, when you said about keeping things light and happy, I worked in a hospital and I worked in spinal cord injury. And in my clinic, I always tried to have a good time. You know, there was always, when it was appropriate, you know, we had a good time, played music and everything. I was lucky because I had a free reign. But with that, you could see people's states of minds going from working kind of negatively, going up a little bit, you know, feeling maybe a little bit better. With that feeling just a little bit better came a little more hope, right? Now, we're dealing a lot with the physical, and there was also mental with spinal cord injury because it was a big change around. And I saw some things in people I couldn't really believe that happened as their state of mind went up. And as they became more healthier themselves, and then they became the teachers. They taught me too. And they taught the other patients that were coming in that would just had gotten injured. So yeah, we're looking at it on two different ways. The internal one, of course, is just very important. Now, it'd be great for the external, you know, to fall in line when it does, you know, because that help gives to support. But it's there for everybody, believe me. It really is.
Yeah, I feel like some certain professionals, can you hear me, are limited to just what they can do, you know? Some professionals can't talk about like God, higher power, and spiritual things, you know? And I was in an IOP class where there was a handful of people sober and there was a handful of people using, you know, and the professional is trying to give the same care to everybody. So, I mean, I'm with y'all. It's kind of complicated. There's many different levels to it. But for me, it's a feeling of like just loving myself first, like realizing that was just a big part of it. And then it eventually grew.
It's a good place to start, Tim.
There's one more big piece that I've learned in a lot of my training and what I see is stigma. Stigma is a huge piece still in our society with people that are using, especially needles and anyone injecting, you know, there's a big stigma that sets up barriers for people to be able to get the help that they need. You know, there's a lot of shame and guilt in using drugs and being homeless, and you know, so there's a lot of stigma and barriers that prevent people from getting, because when you're in that deep and sort of homeless and have no supports, that has to happen before you can sort of start having insights. And I mean, that generally speaking. So there's a big stigma piece that I see that prevents that prevents people from getting the help that they need to.
But
And it's in hospitals, in the emergency department. I see it a lot with the people that overdose. You know, they're treated way different, and I've seen it, than somebody who's coming in with like a broken arm or broken leg. It's unfortunate. It happens. You know, they're released right away without setting them up with any supports. And anyways, I could go on and on about that, but I'm not going to.
But isn't it, those are external factors that are realities that you're stating, trauma, the way people are treated in hospitals. But within that, we still have to come to a place within ourselves, Tanya, where we find solace or the answer that we need to see. And until that happens, we're always going to be a victim of the circumstances. No one is doubting the dishonesty and unfairness of the world, and also the incredible trauma that people have been experiencing in life.
Yeah,
I work with the Native people, and obviously trauma is a huge factor in their world. But the fact is, they still have to come to an understanding. If they're going to talk about it all the time, they're going to keep reliving it, and that destroys their natural feeling, which is so easy for them to be in. I mean, they are just easy to get into the silence and the spiritual feeling. But if they continue to talk about all the harshness of the world, and what they've experienced, what happens is they become a victim of their own thoughts.
I'm speaking to the question why you had this whole topic was, why is there an opioid epidemic? Okay, a big so that part I'm talking about, stigma, social detriment, people not having housing. I mean, those are parts. I get though, you have to have the whole picture. And of course, yes, it's all about having an understanding and getting quiet and all that stuff. But we're talking about, this is a bigger, if you want to really ask why, you have to really look at all the parts. Why?
That is correct. That 100% correct.
Yeah, I mean, that's the cause for the disconnect in the first place. You know, societal standards, and people tend to go with whatever is generally accepted by society, but something being generally accepted doesn't make it right or true. It just makes it generally accepted. You know, and even that changes as you go from, you know, one country to the next, or sometimes even one town to the next. And there's an entirely different set of beliefs. And yeah, when you're raised with a certain belief system, that does tend to be where you go. You know, it's not always, but that tends to be where people go to. So I'm definitely glad you brought that up, Tanya, because it's not the problem. The cause wasn't the drugs.
Not at all. That's just a symptom.
Yeah, the problem was feeling disconnected and unloved and not valued. That generally speaking is why people get into it in the first place.
Yeah. And then hence the epidemic. And yet, but then now that we have this epidemic, there's so many more barriers now because of that, you know, for people to get help that they need.
Absolutely. And that is a factor as well. Absolutely.
Patty,
How
you've been
about
awfully quiet.
Hi. So I'm really interested in this topic as what is mine to do as a volunteer in this community. And I see there's a lot of solutions starting to percolate. I'm noticing on January 30th, there's a Opioid Awareness Day on the Hill in Minnesota. And I'm reading about consultants going into, not consultants, I don't know what we call them, going into emergency rooms to be like the front line of people who have overdosed. And like, wouldn't it be cool if every time somebody was coming up awake from an overdose had somebody who just was standing next to them as unconditional love. And that's not going to be the nurses and the doctors, because they've got a job to do and they've got, but somebody like me or us or anyone in the principals community for that matter, or tons of people in the recovery community just have been there, done that, and just would love to be able to help. And I don't know what mine is to do, but I spent a year volunteering in a treatment center, having profound discussions. And now that I look back at it, I think what an absolute privilege and honor it was to be there for these people as they're recovering, and for me too. And, but for some reason, the powers that be wanted a more clinical, that time that I was using to be more clinically based. So I'm not sure what that means. It has nothing to do with spirituality, I'm assuming, but had more to do with techniques and whatever, and which are all fine. It's all fine, whatever works. But imagine just having somebody at your bedside as just a beautiful space of love. I don't know if that's not possible, but I just think that's a beautiful thought.
It is a beautiful thought, because the moment they come out of their haze is the moment when they need that the most. In fact, a calming influence right at that point would eliminate 80% of what they experience afterwards, because they've gotten what they need. Generally speaking, people don't need a lot of support. They just need it at a certain point. And yeah, and in Portugal, where they have a whole different model than anywhere else in the world, the doctor says we have to be there when they need us. And what you're saying is something. And Amanda O'Shea's coming on next month, and she's talking about the recovery program has to help people be ready when they leave, so that they don't have to, they need support in that. So there's points in our recovery cycle when we need a little something like what you're talking about. And that moment when they come out of that haze would eliminate 80-90%, because that's what we do with our kids. When the kids are troubled and we give them a little bit of love at the right moment, they rebound naturally. But if they get caught up in that cycle and it becomes a repetitive behavioral cycle, they then get to be psychoanalyzed with problems. So the key point, and in a relationship, in a marriage, that's what it's about, is at the right point, that person is supporting. You don't need a lot of support from your partner, but at a certain point, certain times, you do. And that is definitely what you're talking about. I actually never thought of it, but it is really a key factor at certain points.
Just imagine the difference it would make in people's lives. The current model in most treatment centers is when that person comes in, they're told that they have a disease, they're sick, It's changed their brain chemistry forever. They're always going to be fighting it. There's no hope in it. It's very dry and clinical and very, it's, in my opinion and experience, very misdirected, innocently, but it's misdirected. So imagine if when they came in, they were told that they were not alone, that somebody cared about them, and that they were going to be okay. Just that one little change, just give somebody some hope. I would love to see you sitting at bedsides, Patty, and I don't see why you can't. You just have to find the right place.
Yeah, for sure. And Greg, what you just said made me tear up. Absolutely. That's exactly what we need.
Yeah. We're going exactly in the wrong direction, thinking it's the right way. And you can look back through history at all kinds of times when the medical community was incredibly misdirected. Like they used to think that bad smells caused disease. And they were so sure that that was correct at the time. When germ theory came out, it was fought for decades by doctors. They still didn't want to wash their hands and equipment before surgery because they couldn't believe that there were these invisible little things that were killing people. So just because it is accepted in the medical community does not make it correct. It doesn't make it helpful. It's just their best attempt at explaining something right now. And right now, they're not at a level of consciousness where they can see the true cause of things. And that's okay right now because there are other options. There's other places for people to go. And there's now, 4 or 5 3 principles treatment centers around the world. And that's pretty amazing to me. Yeah, it's a very small number, but you know what? It's an option. And it's growing. And that makes me so happy to see that growing and more of these centers opening up.
Is there coverage for those centers, or do you have to have money to get in?
It's both.
Good.
I don't know if all of them are covered under medical stuff, but I know
Right.
I know at least a few of them are, and the rest of them I'm sure will be soon.
Oh, because that's a big barrier, money. Just quickly, there is so my role at Canadian Mental Health Association and at the overdose prevention site is I'm a peer worker. So the peer world is growing in the sense that I'm hired. Part of what you need to have to be a peer support person is lived experience, and then some education and blah blah blah. But we have 2 peers in the hospital, Cambridge Hospital right now. Very, it's a start, but they do exactly what Patty was saying, and they're hired for that role specifically so that when somebody comes out of an overdose, there is a peer support person there with lived experience that has overdosed and can say, I've been where you've been, and that support. I mean, that's 2 people. It's a start,
Mm-hmm.
but we're really trying to grow this peer thing. And I don't know about the States, but here it's becoming really a lot more popular. So there's small little, slow progress, but it's yeah. And we need people like us to get the word out and to be like, we're here to help, So
Yeah, don't give up, Patty. Just try somewhere else.
Oh,
There's bound to be somewhere that'll let you do.
yeah, I know. It's unlimited, and
But your concept is dead on, Patty.
So
And
Tanya, I'm from Kitchener. I'm living in Minneapolis. So are you in that area?
Yeah, I'm Guelph. So
Oh, okay.
like,
We're neighbors.
City, we're neighbors.
But I did not know that they were doing that. And I wonder if there's programs like that here in Minnesota. I suppose apparently I need to go to the state capitol on the 30th to find out what's going on. So.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
And the 2 of you should actually get together and chit chat some more because your heart is so similar in what you see, and that's a way for you to grow together, because that I highly endorse that idea. So
I want to just talk about the practicalities, though, like what Tanya was talking about, how housing and stuff like that. So a friend of mine, she didn't overdose. She this is her third DUI, and ended up in a ditch and spent the night in jail. And then they released her out onto the street, and it's like 10 degrees outside. And I'm like, there's pieces of the puzzle that aren't connecting. And my mind is just boggled. And I get it. We don't have the money but at least put her someplace where it's warm so she can make some phone calls, so she can get some place to go. I'm really confused about it all, but because that sounds like
the money. It's just going in the wrong places.
Yeah.
They're spending so much money on this like war on drugs and whatever, and trying to fight all of that instead of the actual cure for it. We could build this stupid wall between Mexico and the US, but it's not going to stop drugs from coming in. And it's not going to stop people from getting into the country. They'll find other ways to get in. So that's a gigantic waste of money that could be spent on housing.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling.
Transitional housing is amazing. Tiny houses. They don't cost much to build, and each person gets their own little place with a key, and they can go in and they can lock their door and they can have privacy. There's lots of things that can be done, and it's just going to take people like us to get out there and become active in the communities and start pushing for it. Because if people aren't pushing for it and coming up with a viable program, the money's never going to be there. We can't sit around and wait for money. Money's there. That's been proven throughout history. When somebody comes up with a great idea and really pushes for it, people rally behind them, and money shows up, and things happen, and people get helped, and cats get on video over and over again.
So but your cat is a very calming influence for me, and I'm not even in the same room as your cat.
He's great. He even when I sing, if I'm singing a song that has like a sad tone to it, he thinks I'm sad, and he'll come up and try to give me love. It's such a cute thing. We could all be more like kitties. Or doggies. Who steal our places on the couch. This has been beautiful, guys. This is exactly what Harry and I were hoping to get to, was a place where people feel inspired to do something, take some action. This isn't going to change by us sitting on this webinar. It's not going to change that way. It's going to change by us getting out into the communities. Not forcibly, but in love. Like you said, Patty, just coming with that unconditional love. And people can sense that. People feel that. Why do you think we have pets? You know what I mean? That it's that place we can come where we get that unconditional love. We come home and we know we're going to be loved. And everybody deserves that. And there's no reason why everybody can't have it. There's more than enough in this world.
Yeah, I feel like just for like people who work 9 to 5, like a place to where they can gather and stuff would be also pretty awesome. Kind of like what we're doing here,
Right.
And you could feel it, can't you? Like you could feel at the beginning we're all separate and we're all into our heads and we're wondering where the feeling is. And now at the end of the show, which so often happens, the second half of our shows are often quite a bit more succulent in the feeling of love than the first half, and you could feel the calming influence within ourselves. It's actually very healthy, and it is really the answer to everything. What a surprise! Something so innocent could be so powerful, and thank goodness we have each other. Honestly, you know, Tanya, when you share what you share, it's enriching for me, because you're showing me something that leads to a deeper feeling. And if we run away from subjects, that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring this topic up. It's easy to run away from this topic, and you could feel at the beginning when we were talking about it, it is a relatively heavy topic, but within it, when we come to a feeling within ourselves, we're part of it. You and I are part of this opiate crisis, whether we want to admit it or not. And we're connected to it. And it's affecting beautiful people out there. Oh, unbelievably incredible potential of love and understanding, and so on. I better, I'm going to start to cry. Yeah.
Well, thanks everybody. This was wonderful. I think it's be a good time to cut it off here, and we'll see you all next time. Love you all. Go out and spread the love.
Thank you for participating, people.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody have a great day.